Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here. I know that you know why you're here. I'm Mayor Gerald Hoover and want to thank you for spending some evening time here for this very important meeting. My job was just to welcome you, and so with a smile, I welcome you and thank you for being here. And now I'd like to turn it over to the man you'll be hearing more from this evening, as well as our panel, and he will take it from there. And I don't see why in the world you couldn't just give him a round of applause for doing this. Bobby Vitek.
Gerald, you did promise that we would pass the plate. Thank you, Mayor. Welcome to one and all. My name is Bobby Vitek. I'm one of the pastors at Holy Ghost Lutheran Church, and I'm absolutely blessed to be among you here this evening. I think it's so important that we are here today. I'm going to be the moderator for us this evening, and I just have to say that I was mutually agreed upon by Jane Pope and by Gerald Hoover, and after they had that conversation, the mayor approached me and asked if I would be willing to take on this particular capacity, and I said gladly. I said gladly. Well, let me tell you why. It's because I think we absolutely need to be together tonight. We need to be together to listen, to learn, to ask good, hard questions, and to hear responses. And also believe that we're not here just to talk about the quality of health care, but also believe that we're here to talk about the continued quality of community. So thank you. I want to thank each and every one of you for being here. Our purpose tonight is to garner a greater understanding of what occurred with Hill Country Memorial, why it occurred, where we go from here. And so we have just a few, I'm not going to call them ground rules, but just ways we're going to roll here this evening. So if you will indulge me, please. We're going to be here for about 2 hours of this evening. Half of that time, we're going to hear from a panel. We're going to receive information. And we'll introduce that panel here in just a couple of moments. We're going to follow that time by the other half of our time. That'll be used with community questions. And so we'll talk about those community questions here in a minute. You'll get note cards. If you don't have them already, scribe your questions on there. And so the rest of our time, half time, will be used answering, or you asking those questions through me, and the panel answering those questions. Let me let you know what we're not here for tonight. And we're not here for a debate. And we're not here for an open mic session, but we're here for the process of using those note cards. And so let me just tell you a little bit about those. If you haven't received one yet, if you haven't used one yet, you can take.
You can select the questions. If this is a community meeting, then the community should be allowed to speak.
Ma'am, we're going to share some ground rules right now, and if you can't follow them, we're going to have to. We're going to need to shut this down. Community, if we're going to continue this evening, we're going to need to move forward. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. If I could call upon law enforcement, please.
Thank you. Thank you.
Would the community not have an opportunity to speak, sir?
So what we're going to do here this evening, they're going to speak through note cards, and that is our process this evening. Yes, ma'am. The note cards will be distributed. You can write your questions on those. You can fold those, put those in this glass container up here. I'll read those questions and the panel will respond. I do want to say this, that realizing that some of you have already scribed some questions, you might want to listen real carefully to the panel discussion or the panel information, because they may just answer your questions. And so you can pull those, or you cannot submit those yet, because otherwise that's going to be taking away for some valuable time that we could in covering a broader sense of questions. And so you may want to consider taking those. I'll do my best to offer us an opportunity to answer as many questions as possible. Anticipate already that we're not going to get to all of those questions. And so questions and answers will be posted at the Hill Country Memorial website under frequently asked questions and answers. For those questions on the note cards, let me just offer a couple of suggestions. Please ask questions and don't give sermons. I hear too many of those, okay? And I also want to say, if I sense that I need to reframe a question, I'll certainly do that. Also, if something is maybe too personal or possibly inflammatory, derogatory, maybe even too inappropriate to ask, I will unfortunately not be able to ask those questions. A word about our presence here tonight. I don't think it really needs to be said, but maybe it does need to be said. Realizing that emotions really run high for some on this subject, please, we're going to want to refrain from clapping, from applause, from booing, from interruptions, from blurting out comments. If we could hold fast just to three pillars this evening. One would be respect, another civility, and another orderliness. We're so thankful that we're able to even come together to have this conversation this evening. And so we pray that we can continue with it. So, panel, I'm going to ask you all a couple of things too. One, I'm going to ask you to be precise and concise. We have a certain amount of time. We've got a lot of questions. And so if you could really channel those and be straightforward for the sake of us moving on. Also, if opportunity prevails, I would like to also help us to move on. If we kind of feel like we're getting bogged down a little bit, I'll ask for a little clarity and for us to shake it up just a little bit. So also, just want to ask us if we could simply abide by some of these rules or ways that we're going to roll tonight. I would sure appreciate it. The gift card that Gerald gave me to Whataburger doesn't really cover a whole lot. So if we could stay in these lanes, please, I would appreciate hearing an amen. Amen. All right. I think we're ready. We're going to get rolling here. Everybody breathe in and out. Breathe in. Breathe out. We're going to start this meeting like the city council begins almost every one of its meetings, and that's with a prayer. So please bow. Almighty God, you alone are the great physician. So we thank you, God, for the gift of community. We thank you for the opportunity to gather this evening so we might hear as well as be heard. So God, guide us. Guide us toward the needed answers of the what's and the whys and the wheres with respect to Hill Country Memorial. Be with us in a gracious way with our presenters that they may speak with clarity. Be with our assembly as they may offer concerns and questions with directness, couched in respect. So, Lord, we pray that you descend upon us, your Holy Spirit, on our community, in this room, and with each and every heart. And may, oh God, you lead us in this process tonight as we go forth with hope, with healing, with restoration and health. And all God's people said, amen. I want to introduce your panel here this evening. First of all, if you'll give a wave, Jenny Weezer, Hill Country Memorial Board Chair. Jane Pope, Hill Country Memorial CEO. John Hawkins, CEO, Texas Hospital Association. Where are you, John? There you go. All right. John Henderson, CEO, Texas Organization of Rural and Community Hospitals. Dan Miller, CEO, Methodist Healthcare. And Dr. Paul Hancock, CMO, Methodist Healthcare. Thank you all. Thank you all for making the journey and being with us here this evening. Up to bat first will be Jenny Weezer and Jane Pope. So y'all talk to us, speak to our heads, and also speak to our hearts.
Thank you, Bobby, and thank you to everyone who's in this room for coming here tonight. We're here to take you through the whys and hows of how we came to the decision to sell Hill Country Memorial. And that was a decision that was not made lightly at all. Many of us here in this room and on the board were, this hospital has been with us almost all of our lives. I personally was born in Keitel Memorial, but I was standing in the parking lot of HCM when it opened, had my first elevator ride. In fact, I had two because my brother figured out that we could actually simulate free fall if you jumped at the right time when the elevator was going down. So It's not, I mean, it's a place that holds emotion for all of us, and what I hope to do tonight is to take you through the reasons, the rationales, and turn some of the sadness that you're feeling. I feel the same sadness, but turn it into hope, because I think there is good reason to hope for the future of HCM. So Jane's going to go and present first, kind of the rationale and the environment, and then I will come back and talk to you about the rationale that the board used, the process that we used to come to this decision.
Thank you, Jenny. As Jenny said, I'm Jane Pope. I'm the CEO here at Hill Country Memorial. And when I think about tonight, I think about all of you who are our friends, our family, our community. And what an important decision this is for all of us, a generational decision. And I know some of you came for answers. Like Jenny said, you wanted the why. We're going to share the why. Some of you are angry. I understand that. I really do understand that. I'm hoping as we get through the why, we can move through some of that anger. But I think we have to disclose there's anger in the room. And I also know some of you are grieving. And grieving the loss of what you perceive was the very best part of Hill Country Memorial. And I think we need to pay tribute to that. But it's also about a birth. It's also about a new beginning. And my hope for tonight, my hope is that we can work through some of the why, and the anger's still going to be there. And some of the grief is still going to be there. But if we can work through that, and we can start to focus on the future, I think we'll all be in a really good place. This is my community too, and I will tell you, I understand how you feel. I felt the same way. I'm going to show you a bunch of data. Data I didn't want to see. I really did not want to look at it. I did not want to see it. But once I saw it, reflected on what my accountabilities were. And my accountability is to ensure that there is generational health care. And I needed to focus on widening that circle and making some decisions and taking that to the board. And so what I want to share with you tonight is some of the why and how we got here. And then I'm going to turn it back to Jenny, as she said, to talk about the process of from where we took it from there. I'm going to tell you some of this data that I'm going to show you. Well, no, all of this data has gone to a third party to be verified. And so some of it has come from Texas Hospital Association, but it all went to a third party to verify, because I will tell you, I didn't want to see it. And I kept sending it to somebody. Do you see something different? What am I missing? And so this has all been verified data. So I think we'll start with the presentation. Hill Country Memorial is to become part of Methodist San Antonio in order to deepen our care offerings, to expand our accessibility, to provide more services, and you're going to hear that from Dan and Dr. Hancock, and continued local care for Hill Country community. Local care. So the why. I'm going to go through all of these leaves of the lotus flower, but I'm going to start at the top. I'll just give an overview of all of these and then go into some detail. We've had an increased dependence on CMS. Nearly 70% of our patients are Medicare or Medicaid. Reimbursement remains uncertain, and regulations continue to increase. Our workforce. As you all know, it's difficult to recruit and retain qualified workforce. And we have experienced that. We experienced that pre-pandemic. We know that it's very special to live and reside in Fredericksburg, and we know it's expensive to live here, and so that's an added factor for us. Expense growth. We've seen expenses grow across the board from pre-pandemic levels. And although some of them might be starting to come down, they're not coming down as fast as we need them to be, and they're really sticking. Increased competition. We are seeing more competition within the area and from outside the area. And new entrants affect us and affect the number of patients that come to Hill Country Memorial. There's been dramatic cuts to supplemental payments. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the 1115 waiver and the authority board and how important they were to our history and to where we are today, but how that dependence on that program is changing and that the funds are dramatically reduced, dramatically different from when the authority started in 2012. And then a transition to outpatient, that care is moving from inpatient to outpatient with significant financial ramifications. And I'll tell you, I feel like for my entire career, I've been saying that. Patients have been moving from inpatient to outpatient. The data I'm going to show you tonight is going to show you the significant shift that we've experienced in the last couple of years. Yet, we're operating from a position of strength. And so, despite all of those negatives, we continue to deliver on quality, experience, have a good balance sheet. And so those trends are things that I want to share with you tonight. So Medicare margin. What you can see in that slide is we have never been able to break even on Medicare. The best we did was back in 2010 when we were negative 5% margin. And that we've had ups and downs, but basically we negative 12% on Medicare. So every Medicare patient, and please do not hear that we do not want to care for Medicare patients. We absolutely do. Medicare is key to Hill Country Memorial. Yet every Medicare patient we don't make profit on, we don't break even on, we lose. And so in addition, there's a continued shift in the nation to move from Medicare to Medicare Advantage, which pays even worse than Medicare. And so we've seen that continued shift to Medicare because we're aging, and that 70% of our population really are Medicare, and we don't make money on Medicare. And I don't ever, and the reason I'm struggling on this, I don't ever like to say make money and patients in the same sentence, but we are not able to break even on Medicare. The next slide, yes. So our EBITDA, our earnings before interest, depreciation, and amortization, you can see 2020, 21, and 22, where we have a significant negative trend. Our net operating income for the 3 years of 20, 21, and 22 are negative. Significant in 2022, and that our increased dependence on governmental payers. So our business has shifted. It's shifted to outpatient. We've had a 31.9% decrease. So our average daily census decreased from 6.1 patients in 2022 alone. So we've seen that decrease in inpatient. So they're going to outpatient. And 50.9 decrease in our average daily census has gone to 13.5. So since 2012. 2012, we were having, and I'm looking at some of you who maybe were at Hill Country Memorial, or have some expertise on being at Hill Country Memorial. We had a significant decrease from the number of patients in a bed since that period of time, because we're caring for patients efficiently in an outpatient setting with good outcomes, with good experience results. But the market is changing, the world is changing. So our shift is a 10.5 increase in outpatient surgeries. So that increased from 3,929 outpatient surgeries in 2022. Whereas our inpatient surgeries are a 55.69% decrease in inpatient surgeries. So those decreased to less than 500 inpatient surgeries in 2022. We know, and we're very proud of our Restore program. Very proud of it, our joint program. Yet, joints are going home on the same day. I'm looking at some of our team who've had a joint and get to go home on the same day, including myself, where patients go home that same day. Again, great quality results, great experience results. However, the reimbursement is very different from inpatient to outpatient. And so when you look at that dramatic change, that changes the trend. And it's not like we are the only ones that are doing it. It is happening across the nation. So labor expense. We saw an 18% higher in our labor expense, or $6.8 million. That our medical expenses are 14.4% higher, or $1.8 million. And that our drug costs are about 20% higher. And I'll tell you, our pharmacy team and our pharmacy and therapeutics group are all over drug costs. And they're doing everything they can to ensure that we have the best pharmaceuticals at the lowest price. But we still saw an $830,000 increase in drug costs. So our expenses are outpacing our growth. Our 1115 waiver program, I'm thankful that we've had the 1115 waiver. For any of you who've been part of that, that has been really important to Hill Country Memorial when the authority was set up back in 2012. You can see the funds from that program. Some years were $10 million. What we've experienced is the return from those programs is significantly, I mean significantly different than when it was started. And I know both Johns will talk about the 1115 waiver program. That's our experience with the waiver. So we know if we have a 1%, an increase by 1% in our expenses for our supplies, that's $1 million decrease in net revenue at Hill Country Memorial. So we are that sensitive to changes in the environment. And if we went back, and I'm not going to take us back because I want to spend more time on your questions, to those costs, you can see what that significant change was to Hill Country Memorial. So nearly half of our service lines have no contribution margin. 3 of our service lines carry the organization. The other 9 service lines bounce between, that's an iceberg, so the tip of the iceberg. The other 9 can be profitable, but some months may not be profitable. And so there's a high reliance on those 3 service lines. And Jenny's going to talk about when we examined the next steps with this, do we start looking at service lines and reducing service lines? And we didn't want to do that. So, I don't like this slide. I really do not like it. But it gives indicators to when it's time to take action. So, early warning signs, loss of market share, inability to secure price increases, increased difficulty to recruit independent physicians, and competition opens an outpatient center in your locality. Those are the early signs of time to take action, time to review. There's also quality metrics decline. I didn't check that because we have not experienced that. Our quality continues to be world-class. What are the just-in-time signs? We don't have ratings, so we didn't get a ratings downgrade. A second year of an NOI decline. I showed you that. We have had 3 years of an NOI decline. Volume decline in the emergency department, outpatient visits or surgery. And as I shared, those have significantly declined. And then a reliance on our investments to break even. That's what we've had to do, that and the waiver dollars. The latent signs. 3rd year of an NOI decline. We've experienced 3 years of an NOI decline. So that's an objective group that says, you know, boards should look at, leaders should look at, if you're experiencing those things, it's time to look. We also know that hospitals typically start looking 5 years after it's too late. And so what this organization did, what this board did, is took that information I just shared, and said, let's look at it, let's see what we are going to do. And so with that, I'm going to turn it to Jenny. Oh, there's our perfect storm, sorry. So the supplemental payments, the changing demographics, the weak profitability in our core business, high Medicare, increased competition, and then talent recruitment and retention. And so unfortunately, that was our perfect storm that caused us to look. And I want to share with you, I also believe that causing us to look is a good thing. It's a good thing for expanding care and access, but I'm going to turn that to Jenny to talk about that. What's that? Oh, I'm trying to get off the stage, obviously. All right, so this is just the same data presented differently. You can see from 2012 to 2022 revenue growth. You can see our EBITDA that we have a negative this past year, negative $5 million earning before interest, depreciation, and amortization. And our net operating income was negative $10 million. Our average daily census was 13. I know. And an average daily census of 13 with a thriving going concern, I think we all know what needs to happen as far as examining next steps. Not knowing what we were going to do, but examine what are the next steps. And so then I'm getting close to turning this to Jenny. So our position of strength is we're strongly integrated delivery network with physicians with growing. We have a reputation for high quality. I know you all know that. You've all experienced it. All very proud. I can look at the team members, the physicians in the audience, who deliver on that every day. Stable operations in spite of all those other pressures. Very strong balance sheet, and historically limited competition and strong demographics. All right, that one. So we started our Baldridge journey in 2007. And that's when Debbie Dooley said, wow, we're performing at below average. And she asked her CEO, can she go to this Baldridge conference, not to ever win the award, but to improve practices so that we could, for all of you who put coins in the jar, for all of you who have heart for this organization and for this healthcare, so that we could deliver better than average care. Because you deserve it, and you demand it, and you should have it. And so you can see over all of the years where applying that criteria enabled us to perform in the top decile of the nation. In the last 10 years, we've performed as a top 100 hospital. We 6 times as a 100 top hospital. I will tell you, the 4 years we didn't get it wasn't because of quality. The benchmark that you have to get over to be considered the hurdle is you have to have a profit. If you don't have a profit, you can't be a 100 top hospital. And so we're proud of the quality, all of the team, proud of all of the work you do, but this caused us to pause. It caused us to pause to consider. No one made a decision at this point, but just to review the data and make some decisions going forward around what was best for you, the community, and for all of us, all of the team. Now, Jenny, it's for you.
Okay, so as I said, I'm going to take you through the process that we as a board used in order to come to this decision. And in order to do that, I need to take you back 3 years to the fall of 2020. And in the fall of 2020, we did something that we do every year as a board, and that is have an annual strategic planning session. Because, I mean, many of you have sat on this board, many of you have sat on other boards, and you will know that the purview of the board is not to operate the hospital, it is to provide strategic vision for it. And so that is what we undertook to do in that session. One of the topics that we considered was alternatives to independence. Based on the environment that Jane has outlined, we tried to outlaw it, but we were unsuccessful. Based on that data, it was incumbent on us, who are responsible from a fiduciary standpoint, that we look at where we are and what we need to do. So we considered alternatives to independence in that annual strategic planning session. And after that session, Penny McBride, who was the chair at that time, formed a task force. Concomitant with the formation of that task force was the engagement of a third party to look at us as, from an independent standpoint, of our viability for independence. So what the task force did was to provide information from the board perspective to the consultant, Kane Brothers, to help them analyze our viability as an independent. And I should just note that 10 years prior, we had engaged Kane Brothers to do the same analysis, and that analysis came back positive, which is borne out in the last 10 years of operation that we had. So the analysis of independence took us about 6 months, and at the end of that 6 months, we determined as a board that we needed to explore options, partnership options. And that was a unanimous board decision. Okay, when we started as a task force, we had 6 objectives in mind. Because again, I just want to stress to you that the goal of this was not to remain independent at all costs, which would have been nice, but was to continue the upward trajectory that we started back in 1971. So, in order to do that, we thought we had to have a commitment to longevity for healthcare in the community. We wanted not just to remain in the community, because we could do that probably as an independent for some years, but we wanted to expand and add services for our community. We wanted a situation that would allow for continued capital improvements, for expansion, remodeling, equipment. We wanted to look at something that would continue our quality, that would provide education for our employees and workforce development. And if we were going to end up giving up some independence, or all of our independence, to be accurate, we wanted a seat at the governance table. So, in addition to that, if you're looking for a partner, you want somebody who has a good track record doing this before, who has a commitment to high quality, and who has strong financials. So, you might say, did you only consider merger or acquisition? And the answer to that is no. We looked very closely at the 3 scenarios open to us. Independence, we looked at what a taxing entity might do for us, and then we studied an acquisition situation. So what does independence look like? As I said, I've just said it, we could have remained independent for a time, but that wasn't sustainable with the mission that we have to provide exceptional care and a wide breadth of services to the community. So the iceberg picture, after a time, we were going to be faced with cutting some of the services that never provided money to the bottom line. And frankly, that was not a palatable situation. So could we fundraise out of this? I wish that we could have. We have a roughly $16 million funding gap, and over the last 5 years, through the extremely generous help of community members, we've raised about $3.5 million a year. So you can see there's quite a delta between our ability to fundraise and the money that we need to operate. the hospital. This is just a little historical retrospective on fundraising. I think it's a great opportunity to, look at your neighbor and say thank you, because all of this money, $40 million of the $80 million that we've raised since 1996 was from contributions from all of us in this room. So what a blessing to live in a place that does something like that. Over the 18 galas that we've had, we've raised $5 million net. As someone who parked cars and arranged transportation for many of those galas, I would have liked to see that number a little higher, but $5 million was good and the parties were fun. So could we tax our way out of this? Well, we certainly recognize that adding a tax to the community is an additional burden on you, the community. And at the end of the day, a taxing district truly would not enable the quality growth that we've had over the last 52 years. In addition, we serve a multi-county area. We serve about 9 counties. And as Jane has mentioned and alluded to, healthcare has changed. It's not all given to people within the walls of the hospital. A lot of it's done on location as an outpatient. So none of the money that we would tax and raise in Gillespie County would be able to be put to some of our satellite clinics that we have. And that's a strategy for the communities that we serve. So we really then began to look seriously at merger and acquisition. And what would that do for us? Well, if we were able to achieve the 6 goals that we had when we set out in this study, what that would do was keep our healthcare local, expand our healthcare, and give us the ability to continue to supply quality healthcare into the future. Okay, so why now? Because I've said several times we didn't have to do this now. Well, I mean, we have a business. I know many of you in this audience have businesses. This is pretty logical to my mind. If you have an asset that has value, you don't wait until you've drained all the value from that asset to look for somebody to buy it. You go out when you're at your strongest and you make the best deal that you can. Very sadly, many hospitals are right now in the position of having waited too long. And they're in dire financial hardship, and they're either not going to receive an offer and are going to close or going to be bought for pennies on the dollar. Okay, so why Methodist? Why did we choose Methodist? Well, we had a very strong assurance from them that care would remain local. We have from them a commitment to excellence in care. They have quality scores that generally are close to ours. No, they're very high quality scores. And our culture is a culture of quality. You know, we've got people that go to work every day striving for the best medical outcome, and we wanted an organization that recognized that. So Methodist does have a proven record of quality. We believe very strongly that they'll expand services here to our community, that we'll be able to, many of the services that you had to go out of town for could be provided for right here in Fredericksburg. They're going to provide a strong workforce pipeline. They have a nursing school. We see the ability to train and develop nurses, to send people, kids from our town who might otherwise think they weren't going to be able to live and work in Fredericksburg, might be able to go to nursing school, and this will be an excellent opportunity. And finally, we saw a strong commitment to capital investment. Okay, so what are the structures going forward? The first one I want to speak to is the foundation, because that's I hear a lot of questions around it, rightfully so. As I said, I parked cars at many of the galas, so I'm concerned where that money would go. So let's talk about the foundation. When this closes, the foundation, which was started and its sole mission was the support of the hospital, will no longer have the hospital to support. But the nearly $40 million that we've raised over the years that hasn't gone into upgrades at the hospital will remain local in the foundation. Now let me go over to the advisory board. So this board is the one that I alluded to when I said, if we're going to do this, we want a seat at the table. So we have 4 picks for that board. We've made the picks already. Methodist has 4 picks, and I think they'll probably take some of our opinions on that. And then the chief of staff will sit as a voting member on that board. The primary focus of that board, especially initially, will help us to transition from where we are today to a part of the Methodist system. This board, and particularly the 4 members I think that we appoint, will serve as advocates for our community and let them know what it is we expect and what we need. And of course, it will also do activities such as credentialing. The middle entity is a little more complex and hasn't been fully fleshed out, but it is an entity that will need to be formed in order to receive the proceeds of the transaction. In addition, that entity will operate the Wellness Center, which didn't go with the sale, and the thrift store. It will have to monitor compliance with post-closing conditions and then conduct reporting for approximately 5 years. So what is that? Reporting, from the hospital. When the hospital was ours and independent, we're responsible for certain costs that may occur or crop up 5 years later. So it will have to watch the cost reporting on that. Ideally, and this hasn't been worked out, but ideally, the proceeds from the sale would combine forces with the money that exists in the foundation to create a community foundation of significance. If you could advance, Amanda. So our board members that will go to the Methodist Advisory Board, Dale Krenwalge, Dr. Michael Johnson, Penny McBride, and John Willamy. I think these will all be great advocates for us. And then, as I said, we haven't fleshed out the operation of the middle entity, nor really what would happen in a potential combination. But we've got members of the foundation board who are on your, they're all over. Members of the foundation board and then members of the board of trustees that are meeting to figure out how to convert this foundation. Okay, so what does this mean? Well, for all of us, it means expanded services, enhanced offerings, increased access to top healthcare providers. And I would note, again, in the Why Methodist segment, 70% of the people that leave Fredericksburg for care go to Methodist, which to me indicates that your physicians already consider it to be the place to go. So we'll have more access to that. Uninterrupted care, continued access to the physicians that you have. Economic growth for the Hill Country. Now that the hospital is no longer a nonprofit after the close of this deal, tax dollars will come from the hospital. There will be a significant investment in local health from the foundation that I've described, and then I've already alluded to the tax dollars. So that's it, I think. Yeah. So I think we're going to hear from our other panelists before questions, but thank you.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Jenny. Jane, you had something else? You betcha. John Hawkins, CEO, Texas Hospital Association.
Thank you very much, and appreciate the invite and being able to be here tonight. I will talk a little bit about the Texas Hospital Association real quick. We are the statewide trade association located in Austin. We have a little over 600 members. Probably 95% of the hospitals in Texas are members of THA. That is a very diverse group, as you can imagine, urban, rural, investor-owned, not-for-profit, and government entities. So we really get the perspective of what's going on across the state in all of the different sectors of healthcare. I brought some handouts of some resources. I probably didn't bring enough of them that will be available afterwards, but I hope you'll go to our website, because we actually have created several explainers that we're actually using over at the Capitol right now and in Washington to really talk about the challenges in the healthcare field right now. And so I hope to give you a perspective of what's going on statewide, so you can see how the challenges here at Hill Country are nowhere near unique. And then I'll let John talk a little bit about, more specifically about what's going on, particularly with rural hospitals who are especially challenged in this environment. So obviously we were hearing from the challenges of our members coming out of the pandemic and dealing with just the global economic situation with what's going on in Ukraine, with continued supply chain challenges going forward. And so we wanted to actually get a third-party assessment of that going into the legislative session. Also, we're still trying to advocate in Washington for some financial stability up there as well. And we actually engaged the consulting firm Kaufman Hall to do a report on what's going on across the state with hospitals. And again, this is these aren't just consultants who are speculating about this. Kaufman Hall actually has a business partner that is a software that many hospitals in the state use as their financial reporting tool, and they use it for forecasting as well. So they were able to look at that data and actually come out with this report and really extrapolate it for the rest of the industry. So what's amazing is if you actually look at that data, and I didn't see this PowerPoint until late last week, it's amazing how much these numbers match up when you look at what's going on across the state. So since 2019, Texas hospitals' labor costs are up $18.1 billion. That's 20.9% higher than in 2010. Drug expenses up $2.8 billion, medical supplies up $1.3 billion, or 8.5% higher. So when you look at those economic headwinds and you look at days cash on hand and the financial situation of hospitals, actually 48% of hospitals right now in this state are currently operating in the red, which is not insignificant. And when you look at particularly rural hospitals, they say, looking at, again, days cash on hand, some of the financials, 1 in 10 hospitals in Texas are actually at risk of closure. And again, because of the federal funding, we actually, I think before the pandemic, Texas unfortunately led the nation in the number of rural hospital closures. We haven't had one closed because of some of the financial stimulus that came down, but that really just created a fiscal cliff that we're dealing with right now. So when you look at that federal funding, and there's lots of misconception about the federal relief funding as well. Remember, that went to all healthcare entities with a provider number, so it wasn't just hospitals, it was nursing homes, physician practices, home health, everyone that really provides Medicaid and Medicare services. And really, most of that money actually flowed out to other areas of the country before Texas saw its 2 spikes later in the summer. So we were really, not in a situation to actually take advantage of that. It was certainly helpful, but it did not make hospitals whole. So when you look at the data, hospitals in Texas experienced $3.2 billion in losses in 2022. And more than $3 billion of that is as yet unreimbursed cost since the beginning of the pandemic. And you all know what's going on in Washington right now. It's not likely that they're going to be appropriating any more additional federal relief for the healthcare sector. And then again, just to put it in context, total expenses in 2023 or 2022 for Texas hospitals were $33.2 billion higher than pre-pandemic levels. And Jane mentioned, we're seeing some stabilization in that, but it's not likely to go back to pre-pandemic levels. We also did a survey of our membership about what's going on with their workforce. And again, those challenges continue to exist. It's not just nurses. It's all of allied health. It's really staff across the board at hospitals. And 64% of our members say they are operating with fewer beds and reduced services because of staff shortages that they're dealing with right now. So that has real implications for communities. Jane talked about government payers. Again, this is publicly available data. We've got an explainer on our website that talks about payment sources for hospitals. Texas Medicaid reimburses hospitals at 72% of cost for inpatient services and 75% for outpatient. That results in a $2.7 billion shortfall in the Medicaid program for hospitals. Again, the supplemental payments have been helpful to offset that. Jane mentioned that has changed, which is not as favorable. So even after all of those supplemental payments, hospitals are still incurring $4.6 billion in uncompensated cost annually, and that is at cost, not on a charge level. And again, this is not going to get better because we're about to come out of the public health emergency, so we're going to have to recertify everyone that's on Medicaid right now. That's about 5.5 million Texans. And then we talked about the 1115 waiver and how really that has changed the game in the Medicaid program. Medicare, it only pays 84% of cost. So again, you're not going to make that up in volume as 10,000 people a day go on our Medicare program. But it's tougher than that. That's just traditional Medicare. Obviously, you've seen what's going on in D.C. right now and the discussion about sustainability of Medicare. So it's under continued cost pressure in D.C. The Congress is trying to move more of Medicare into a managed care plan. Those are paying providers at cost less than traditional Medicare. About 47% of Medicare beneficiaries in Texas now are enrolled in Medicare Advantage plans. That's 15th highest in the nation. And about done. So that's it. That's it from the government payer side. So now for the rule.
Yeah, and they've given me 5 minutes, but I'm going to use less than that. Oh yeah, sure. John Henderson. I'm the president and CEO of TORCH. That's an acronym for the Texas Organization of Rural and Community Hospitals. We're the small rural version of what John Hawkins does at the THA. And I wanted to start just with appreciation, not for having me, but for being here tonight. This stuff is tough. It matters. And regardless of which side you come down on the decision, you have my respect for being here tonight. You could be watching a college basketball game or something more fun like that. Prior to joining TORCH, I've been at the association for 5 years in April. Prior to that, I was actually a rural hospital CEO in the Panhandle of Texas. My hometown is a little place called Childress, Texas. So I did that for 15 years. So I come to this conversation with a little bit of perspective and understanding of what y'all are working through. But I'll tell you, there are 158 rural hospitals in Texas. All of them are a little bit different. Every community is a little different, has a little different recipe, has a little different demographics. Fredericksburg is different in that, in almost every measurable way, y'all are a little bigger than the average rural hospital, and you're frankly a little bit better than the average rural hospital in the ways that we measure, so you should be thankful for that. John mentioned closures. Texas has had 26 rural hospital closures in 22 communities since 2010. That's more than any other state, mostly because of geography. We just have more rural hospitals in the denominator than any other state. The way we get 26 and 22 is a few hospitals have closed, attempted reopening, and closed again. The most recent example of that was in Bowie, Texas, up in Montague County. That happened in January of 2020. So that's the bad news. The good news is we actually haven't had a rural hospital closure in the last 3 years. But part of that, of course, is the pandemic. 26% of rural hospitals are at serious risk of closure. John mentioned 10% overall. It's actually, when you cut it, urban, rural, it's like 5% urban, 26% rural. So rural hospitals are 5 times more likely to close. 50% are very vulnerable, and more than 50% are upside down. So when I looked at watched the presentation from Jane and Jenny, and they talked about the perfect storm, I have to tell you, that's all external. It's not Fredericksburg's story. It's all of rural Texas's story that y'all are working through. So I want to mention 3 or 4 quick trends. That trend away from the hospital, where you have a decline in admissions, 51% decline in inpatient revenue. Everybody's dealing with that. The only exception was during the public health emergency, where the state of Texas just didn't have bed capacity and didn't know where to transfer people. So for a couple of years there, it might have looked a little different, but except for that, the trend for a generation has been away from what we traditionally think of as hospital care, having a patient in bed overnight, to more outpatient care. That is not going to change. I actually think it's going to go from the hospital into primary care clinics and ultimately into your home and ultimately onto your phone. You know, that's the trajectory, if that makes sense. I don't want to get caught up in the waiver negotiation because that gets really technical really fast, but the short version of that is Texas did not expand Medicaid, and we are not going to expand Medicaid, so we entered a negotiation with the federal government on what we could do instead. There are billions of dollars in the waiver, and thankfully we've been able to renew and extend that, but every time we renew and extend it, we get a little worse deal, and there's actually harm to rural community hospitals. That's not your authority's fault. It's not anything to do with leadership. It's just the way the world is right now. There's less rural dollars out there. And then the last thing is that trend around Medicare. I work primarily for rural hospitals at the state capitol in the Medicaid program. That's less your issue. It's more Medicare. And I think Jane was saying this very well. That's why we exist. We want to take care of you. But Medicare, which is the overwhelming majority of most rural patients, are operationally negative, and Medicare Advantage, even though it's very popular among seniors, is actually a little bit worse. So you have all these cascading pressures that are coming to bear on rural hospitals, and you're feeling that along with 157 other rural hospitals in Texas. There's nothing unique about this situation. I've heard comparisons to other hospitals in your neighborhood, and that might be appropriate. I'll tell you what I think is maybe a little bit more instructive example, and I'll close with this and hand it over, is recently St. Mark's Hospital, which is in LaGrange, tried to affiliate or merge with a system, and after they had probably waited too long, as Jenny talked about the timing of that decision, they had no takers. Then they went to a tax election, a local hospital district tax election, and got their teeth kicked in. I don't know how that would go here, but for most of rural Texas, it does not go well. And then, that was in 2019, they probably got lifted a little bit through the pandemic, but as of last week, they're trying to decide whether they can keep the hospital open, and they literally are on the ropes and looking at a new model where you give up all inpatient services and only have an ER and clinic. So I'm not saying it's an easy decision or conversation, but I do respect people that come to it proactively and try to work through it from a position of strength. I'll stop there and hand the microphone over, and of course we'll get to questions. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. And Pastor Bobby, don't be afraid. You don't seem shy, but don't be afraid to cut us off if we get a little long-winded. Dr. Hancock, why don't I give you that mic? I don't think we'll both fit up there, so we'll just kind of both stand on each end.
Great. Please introduce yourself.
Hello. Yep. Perfect. Well, good evening. I had a chance to meet many of you, and I see many of the Hill Country team members here tonight that I had a chance to spend today and meet several hundred of them today. My name is Dan Miller, and I'm the CEO for Methodist Healthcare. And Dr. Hancock, do you want to introduce yourself real quick, and then I'll say a little bit more?
Yeah, Paul Hancock. I'm Chief Medical Officer for Methodist Healthcare System. I've been in San Antonio in this role for the last 7 years. Just so you'll know, I'm a native of Lubbock, graduated from Lubbock Monterey High School, Abilene Christian University, UT Southwestern for medical school. And then later in my career, lived in Amarillo for many years and ran the Don and Sybil Harrington Cancer Center after I quit my practice as an oncologist. So, a little background.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hancock. And we're going to kind of go back and forth here, so get ready to keep looking. So I've lived in San Antonio for 5 of my 20 years in healthcare, and I've been the CEO for Methodist Hospital, Methodist Children. I've met a lot of folks who told me they were born at Methodist Hospital or their kids were born at Methodist Hospital. And so I just want to start by saying I know how valuable your time is, how precious this time of the evening is for you and your families. It is very meaningful for us for you to be here. And so thank you so much for being here tonight. When you think about Methodist, this is the one thing that I want you to leave with tonight. This is the one thing that I hope you take away. We are defined by our mission. This is why we exist. This is our sole purpose. And we're a faith-based mission, which is different for a lot of folks. But our mission is serving humanity to honor God by providing exceptional and cost-effective health care accessible to all. As you ask questions of us, if they're relative to Methodist tonight, we'll answer every question relative to our mission. And I'll close with our mission today. When I think about our mission and I think about our ownership, this may surprise you. This is our ownership. So I live in San Antonio. I'm the president of the healthcare system. We have 2 owners, and I'm not aware of another ownership structure like this in America. 2 owners, 50-50, not 51-49, 50-50. And those 2 owners are HCA, which is the largest health system in the country, largest provider in the state of Texas of health services. In Austin, HCA is a partner to the St. David's healthcare system, if you're familiar with that system in Austin. And in San Antonio, it's not the St. David's Health Foundation, it's the Methodist Healthcare Ministries, which is the largest provider of unfunded care in South Texas. And so those are our 2 owners, and they got to agree on everything. Can you imagine that? 50-50, both sides have to agree. Our board is in San Antonio. And our board chair, my boss, is Dr. Mike Lane, a practicing radiologist right now with the South Texas Radiology Group, which covers Hill Country Memorial. That's my boss, and he holds me accountable for our mission of serving humanity to honor God. When I think about Methodist Healthcare, Methodist Healthcare Ministries may be new to some of you, although it serves the Fredericksburg community in the Gillespie County. But Dr. Hancock's going to tell you a little bit about that.
Yeah, so just to briefly introduce you to Methodist Healthcare Ministries, our earnings are what fund Methodist Healthcare Ministries. The top right corner, the number is $150 million, and that's what they're planning on spending in assistance to the uninsured and the underinsured this coming calendar year. You see the map of Texas up on the right. That's the 74 counties that are served by Methodist Healthcare Ministries. And that, for those of you who are Methodists in the room, that corresponds to the Rio Conference of the United Methodist Church. And so that is the purview for Methodist Healthcare Ministries and where they serve. They run a couple of clinics in San Antonio, but overall over the years, just be aware they've given $1.5 billion to serve the communities where they are. One of the things they do across this region are the placement of Wesley nurses. I think there are over 80 Wesley nurses in the communities across this region. The Wesley nurses essentially act as community health workers. There was a person here who was in place, I think, for over 10 years. That role was empty for a couple of years, and it's recently been filled. I want to introduce Kathy Hurst, who's the regional or district manager for the Wesley Health nurses in this region. And Kathy, if you want to talk to her about the role the Wesley nurses play, she'd be happy to talk to you.
Thank you. So certainly we're very proud of the work that the Methodist Healthcare Ministry does in the communities we serve. We're really proud of the work that Methodist Healthcare does in delivering charitable work. So this is the health system. So it may surprise you to know that Methodist Healthcare in the communities we serve provides the most uninsured inpatient care, the most services to Medicaid, and most services to Medicare patients. We're very proud of that. And if you aggregate the charitable work we did this past year, it's $818 million. Also very proud, and by the way, we're about double the next biggest health system in terms of the uninsured we treat, the Medicaid and the Medicare patients we treat. Double the next closest health system. I'm also very proud that we've invested $1.6 billion into our health system just in the last 10 years. This is expanding services to meet the Texas community where they're growing. Just this past year, we committed to $500 million. And you may say, wow, that's a rapid expansion. $500 million, which we'll see projects finish in the next 2 years. Well, we're seeing the same thing across South Texas that you're seeing here in Fredericksburg. I heard it referred to the other day as the Great Texodus. Folks moving to Texas, right? And so we want to meet and invest where the community is growing. We've got very exciting investments in mind, relative to the needs that we're hearing here in Gillespie County and the area that Hill Country Memorial serves. When I look at our system mix of our current Medicare patients, Medicaid patients, and uninsured patients, I have to tell you, it looks just like the community that you live in. It gives us a lot of confidence that we know what we're doing, and when we think about our mission, we've got to be cost effective, right? We've got to be cost effective, we've got to be exceptional, and we've got to be accessible to all. I can tell you, if we're not cost effective, we can't grow and provide the amount of charity care that we do. I think we've done a great job of being accessible to all. I'm excited to be even more accessible to the community that you're in. When we think about exceptional, it's not just about the size that we have, it's about the quality we deliver. And I believe there was a little bit of a jab there that we aim to be almost as good as Hill Country, and so one day, maybe we'll be as good. So, Dr. Hancock, can you talk about our quality?
This is our trophy case. Jane had a small version of Hill Country's trophy case on one of her slides. So up in the top left, you see there that for 2022, we were named one of the top 100 hospitals in the country by Meritive. That used to be IBM Watson Health. Now, Hill Country Memorial is used to getting that. You get it all the time, right, Jane? Yawn. This is our first time to achieve it. And I want you to know that that actually applied to 6 of our hospitals, because 6 of our hospitals operate under one license. We call that our 6-in-1. So that award went to 6 of the Methodist Healthcare System hospitals. Just a few other highlights there. Top 250 best hospitals in the United States from Healthgrades. Just last week, we got news that Healthgrades has designated us as the top-ranked cardiology program in the state of Texas. We're pretty proud of that. Texas has some pretty hotshot heart programs, and now we can say that we are considered to be the best. Top 100 hospitals for cardiac care, critical care, and we received a special designation from Healthgrades for our early COVID care, one of the top 24 hospitals across the United States for our response to COVID early on. 6 of our hospitals are Leapfrog A at the current time, and 2 are Leapfrog B. And U.S. News has recognized us as the best regional hospital 3 years in a row. We anticipate that'll happen again this year.
So I had the chance to talk to a lot of folks over the last couple weeks, and one of the questions that I got was, we understand through the great presentation on why Methodist was considered, but why was Methodist interested in Hill Country Memorial joining the Methodist family? Well, I'll tell you, I can't tell you how proud you should be of the care being delivered in your hometown. We truly see the legacy of care here, the team members, the excellence that we see, the extraordinary medical staff as delivering top care. We see that. We are proud to learn from the Hill Country Memorial team, from the community here. We're humbled by the results that we've seen. And all of the indications today that we've seen is we're going to be better at serving humanity to honor God by Hill Country Memorial joining the Methodist family. That's the short answer. So when we look at it, we say we think it's the right thing for our mission. We think it'll help us serve our mission in your community by partnering with Hill Country Memorial. When we think about our current relationship, we have a lot of folks that come down to San Antonio for care from Gillespie County, from Marble Falls, from the communities we serve. And Dr. Hancock, I know this is mentioned already about services and how we're thinking about those, but we appreciate any comments you have on that.
Yeah, so this slide shows, 2018, there were roughly 27 patients per month that went from Hill Country down to Methodist. This past year, it was an average of 44 patients a month. That's about 1 or 2 patients a day. So as we enter into this, our goal would be to say, well, how do we decrease that? How do we provide services that will continue to grow the inpatient population at Hill Country Memorial and prevent those patients from needing to go to San Antonio. In talking with doctors and some of the staff today, some of the well-tenured staff, it's very clear that one of the ways we may offer help is improving the support from pulmonary and critical care physicians. Because a lot of times that's the reason somebody needs to go to San Antonio is for better ICU support. Hill Country has a great ICU, but sometimes having a telehealth doctor providing that ICU care is not enough. And so it's one of the things we can do. Another things we've talked about is bringing inpatient dialysis to Hill Country Memorial. If patients are on chronic dialysis in this community, they can get outpatient dialysis. But if they get sick and come to the hospital and need a course of antibiotics for pneumonia or they need a surgical procedure, those are patients that have to leave this community because the hospital does not offer inpatient dialysis. So those are just a couple of ideas that come to mind about ways that we can retain patients at Hill Country and grow the inpatient census at Hill Country. Certainly as we get closer, spend more time with the medical staff, brainstorming, coming up with ideas, we anticipate more ideas will come to fruition. But those are just a couple of examples. One of the things we've talked about also is that we have a very large freestanding emergency room in Bernie. And those patients, when they have to be admitted, are admitted to one of our hospitals in San Antonio. But a lot of the people that go to that freestanding emergency room in Bernie are people that live between Bernie and Fredericksburg, or maybe even beyond Fredericksburg. You know, we can offer those patients the opportunity, if appropriate clinically, to come be admitted at Hill Country instead of going into San Antonio. And I promise you a lot of those people are going to jump at that. We saw that during the pandemic with our rural hospital down in Jourdanton. A lot of the people needed inpatient care that we could provide perfectly well at Jourdanton, and we'd offer the patients at other rural hospitals throughout South Texas the opportunity to go there, and they jumped at it. So that'd be another way that we could grow inpatient census right off the bat, to partner with our patient placement center to make those to make this hospital available to those patients.
Thank you. So what does success look like for us? I think it's how do we keep more folks from having to leave Fredericksburg for care? We estimate right now about half the folks that are coming down for care, if we can provide some more support and resources, would be able to stay here at Hill Country Memorial. That's our goal. And that's what success looks like. I'll wrap with our mission slide. That was a very polite way. Let me know we're at time. I had a story to tell too, but so, you know, as you think about our mission, and remember that's the one thing I want you to take away. That's who we are. Think about our mission, you think about our values and our vision. We've lined that up today with Hill Country Memorial. What I could share with you is I heard a lot from the team members today that they're very excited about our mission. They're very excited about being part of a faith-based organization. And that's meaningful to a lot of folks. And so I hope you find that meaningful as well. What I'd share with you is there's so many similarities between the current mission, vision, and values of Hill Country and the missions and vision and values that we ascribe ourselves to every day. Here's my promise to you on behalf of Methodist Healthcare. We're not perfect. In fact, Hill Country in many ways is more perfect than Methodist Healthcare is and the quality results that they deliver every day. We are not perfect. What I promise you is we will wake up every day with one mission, and that mission is to serve humanity, to honor God, by providing you exceptional and cost-effective healthcare accessible to all. With that, I will close, and I think we're going to do the Q&A. So, are you ready? Yes, sir. Okay, all right. Here you go, sir.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all so much. Well, I see that we went about 65 minutes with that, and so I want to give 65 minutes for questions as well. So will somebody help me with Amanda? You'll do that? Yep. Start the timer. I'll tell you what. Oh, sorry. A lot of great questions, a lot of repeat questions, a ton of repeat questions. And so thank you. We will get to the bulk of what we can get to here. All right. Start with an easy one. I think this is an easy one. Maybe not. What will be the name of our hospital?
Oh, that's easy. It is easy. Methodist Hospital Hill Country. Oh, sorry. Methodist Hospital Hill Country.
All right. I started with an easy one, okay? All right. goes like this. When is the final signing? Is it a done deal? And what if the city doesn't approve the easements?
I'll start this one. The estimated date of closure is March 31st, and so that April 1st will be the first day that operates as Methodist Hospital, Hill Country. And what's the second part of that, Bobby? Sorry.
That's right. Is it a done deal?
Is it a done deal? We're continuing to work through integration. Nothing's done till it's done. However, there's no indication why it shouldn't be a done deal. And then the question around easements, I don't know if I'll start it. Look, Dan, why don't you start it, and then I will take it from there.
Yeah, so there were a couple easements that went in front of the city council, and appropriately, I think the city council wanted to, see this forum and get through that. So I think if the question is, will Hill Country Memorial joining the Methodist family be impeded by those easements? The answer to that is no. We can proceed without the easements. However, it creates risk on the foundation. Not on the Methodist healthcare system, it actually creates risk on the legacy foundation if those easements are not supported. And so Jane can explain that, but from a Methodist healthcare system standpoint, we're free and clear without those easements concerned.
Thank you. I wanted Dan to answer that first part of that question. And so the second part is we have to indemnify Methodist for those easements. And so if there was ever any needed access to those easements, that would result in funds coming out of the foundation and funds coming out of the community. And so, yes, could close over the easements, but if it would require that if there were any ramifications, that comes out of the community dollars.
Very good. Next question. Who or what entities will the legacy entity new foundation support?
Well, that certainly remains to be seen, but the goal of that legacy entity or the new foundation would be to support initiatives around public health. I mean, things that contribute to health in the community. The ability to work in our hospital is sometimes hampered by lack of childcare locally. That could be something that might happen. The ability to work at the hospital is hampered by the ability to live in Fredericksburg. So initiatives around housing, studies for, we're talking about people who are working as RNs and not being able really to afford a place here. So that could be something. Certainly education, I think, of nurses would be an excellent, or any kind of medical ancillary, even doctors, would be a great use for this money. But the foundation hasn't formed yet, and it will form and promulgate its own bylaws and create its mission statement. But the money would be designated really for community health.
Next question. Did the board explore establishing a hospital taxing district?
Yeah, I feel that we answered that.
Very good.
Okay.
I'm sorry I wasn't listening. I kind of was.
That's all right. When I attend your church, I only listen to about half of what you say.
Why is HCA/Methodist pulling out of the PHO? How does this benefit health care in the community? Would HCA reconsider?
What is the PHO, Dr. Hancock? And then I'll answer the question.
It's a provider hospital organization.
Did that help? It probably didn't help. It's a contracting entity that was established here to try to make headway with the payer environment. It's no surprise that when you're underwater on Medicare and Medicaid and uninsured, as is happening in many parts of the state, that you try to do your best with the big payers, if you will, to make up for that. So to answer that question, no, we won't reconsider, and let me tell you why. Every answer, we'll look at our mission. Our mission is cost-effective, exceptional, and accessible to all. So when we look at our contracts at Methodist Healthcare, we feel like the cost-effective thing to do is to bring our contracts forward, not to adopt the legacy contract. We think that will preserve services in the community in the longer run and is the right thing to do for the community. And so, I will tell you, that's a meaningful part of what we bring to the table. And for us not to do that wouldn't be true to our mission from that standpoint. This is in no way saying that the PHO isn't wonderful. I think it's done a tremendous job for the community, and I think it will continue to be vibrant and support many independent practices and other aspects of the community. But from a hospital standpoint, we will be working through the Methodist healthcare system relationships as they exist today. Thank you.
Next question. How many total seats on the board, and what does Fredericksburg's input on the board look like?
Bobby, do you think that's about the future board or the existing board?
I think future.
So on the Methodist Advisory Board, it's 8 people, 4 of which are assigned by Hill Country and 4 by Methodist. In addition, the Chief of Staff sits on that, and the Chief of Staff has a vote. And so that's new for us. The Chief of Staff has never had a vote on that board. Then I have a feeling the question also might be around the Legacy Board and the number of seats on that. That's still being determined. As Jenny shared, that conversion committee will be doing that work and really using the bylaws as the platform to begin that.
Thank you. Next question. Will our local doctors be able to work in the Methodist Hospital in Fredericksburg?
Will our local doctors be able to? So I'm not sure that I understand the question. I think the question might be around physicians that assist with birth, and if all doctors. Oh yes. Oh sorry. Yes, they have.
Yeah, there may be a misconception that Methodists would just bring in, quote, our own doctors. That's a misconception, okay? So we have offered medical staff membership to every doctor who's on the current medical staff. The vast majority of them have indicated they do wish to continue as members of the Hill Country medical staff, and that is our medical staff, the existing physicians. Will we try to recruit new physicians? Well, yes. We just talked about maybe critical care pulmonary would be someone we'll try to recruit. But they'll be part of the Hill Country medical staff, okay? We're not going to bring in new doctors to replace the great medical staff that's serving this community.
Thank you. Thank you. Next question. Will hospice continue to operate as part of our local hospital? And here's one close to my heart, 2-part question. Will there be a continued chaplaincy program? I'm looking for a job in retirement, possibly.
I will tell you that part of the Methodist Healthcare Partnership Agreement and how we were founded requires aggressive staffing of pastoral care. And so you'd be well pleased to know that at Methodist Hospital, where I was the CEO for 5 years, there are 22 pastoral care team members full-time at that hospital, including many that specialize in pediatric care. So I met 4 of the chaplains today. And one of them said, "Do I have to become a Methodist in my faith?" And they were okay. They were very, yeah.
The bishop will be here shortly after closing.
There you go.
Make everybody a Methodist.
And I said, and absolutely, actually, they were the 2 pastoral carers for the hospice team members. And so I would tell you, Hill Country Memorial is doing incredible things in the hospice and home health space. We're going to learn from them. And we absolutely want to support the continuation of those services. If anything, we're going to bring a lot of what's working well here down to the other areas we serve to model and copy that.
Very good, thank you. Next question. Why have such a few people made such a critical decision about our hospital without greater community information? And why did it seem that it was done in such secrecy?
Thanks. Yeah, I understand that question. And I think if I were sitting in the audience, I'm pretty much a skeptic. I would have the same question. You have to consider what it means to make a decision like this and the effect that leaking any of this to the community would have on our employees, on our competitors, our vendors, our customers, you, our patients. It's not something that you can bring out. If we were going to sell Fisher and Weezer specialty foods, we wouldn't consult the public. I know you can say there's a difference, but we wouldn't talk about that. You cannot do that. Understand you might not like that answer. I get that, but it's the simple fact of making a deal.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Next question. Since Methodist Healthcare of San Antonio, the purchaser, is co-owned by Methodist Healthcare Ministries, 50-50, there is concern, as records show, that HCA has a history of laying off workers. How can we guarantee that this won't happen?
Sure. I would encourage you to talk to the Hill Country employees right now. I can tell you one of our guiding principles was to offer every employee a job. And does that mean every employee is going to accept? No, but I'd say it's 95, 98, 99% fair, equitable. Many are interested in maybe working for the foundation in the future or retiring, and so there's aspects there. I'm sure you can also imagine that we have a lot of redundancy in positions when we looked at whether it's accounting or things like that where we're fully staffed. Doesn't matter. We still offered every one of those team members a job. One of our guiding principles was nobody's without a job as a result of this, by our choice. And so I hope you can see from Methodist Healthcare, talk to folks in San Antonio or where we serve and see what type of employer we are, relative to those guiding principles and how we support our mission.
Yeah, I mean, we're in hiring mode, both in San Antonio and if we are soon owners of this hospital, we'll be in hiring mode. I did new employee orientation this morning at Methodist Hospital, and we had 91 new employees. So that's what we want. It's not laying people off, it's bringing people in. That's what we need.
Next question. Who or what entities will the legacy entity / new foundation support in the community? Did we answer that one?
Yeah.
Thought so. Thought so. All right. What happened to any kind of conversation with Sid Peterson?
Oh, what's that? I'll start that, and I think a number of us can respond to that. Hill Country Memorial and Peterson Health had a highly collaborative, competitive relationship. Some days we collaborate more, some days we compete more. And so when the board looked at those objectives and what was best for Hill Country Memorial going forward, they examined that. And they looked at what was the track record, and Methodist stood out in the forefront. And really, Peterson has become more of a competitor in the last 4 years and less of a collaborator, and that the board wanted to ensure that as many services as possible could stay local and that services would grow. And it was deemed that Methodist would be able to provide that. Did you want to add, Jenny?
Yeah, I would add to that really, Peterson, really good luck. I hope that they can continue their mission of independence. But we're both rural hospitals, and we're both faced with the same thing. And we're roughly the same size, and the ability to grow and scale and provide more services was not a possibility with a partnership with Peterson. Plus, we're battling Billies and their Tivy antlers,
true.
and
That
I
is
think
true.
that should also weigh in.
I was waiting for that. Next question, will we be able to donate to our local hospital, or will part of it go to San Antonio or other entities?
The Methodist ministries, what Dan and Dr. Hancock talked about, is separate. So the foundation here stays local. It stays for the counties we serve. It does not go to San Antonio. And so the question was, can you donate to the hospital? It will not be donating to the hospital. It will be donating to that legacy entity to support those things that Jenny talked about as far as community health, those broader determinants of health. There's still that ability to donate to that. If one of those initiatives is investing in healthcare providers, so going back to school and getting their degrees, yes, there's that ability, but not to invest in the hospital. But the funds stay local.
Next question. Will there be a Methodist clinic here for people without insurance? And next kind of question connected to it, what about relationships with the Good Samaritan Center?
So the Methodist healthcare system is owned by the Methodist Healthcare Ministries. However, the Methodist Healthcare Ministries does not take their charitable direction on how they administer their funds from the Methodist healthcare system. And so what I would tell you is the Methodist Healthcare Ministries relies on their pastoral care team and network throughout the counties they serve to look at the needs of the counties they serve. And sometimes those needs mean full-scale clinics. Sometimes those needs mean behavioral health providers. Sometimes those needs mean Wesley nurses. So that will really be up to them to continue to survey and look and to say, what does that look like? I can tell you there's a lot of great, including the Good Samaritan program and a lot of the, did I say that right?
Good Samaritan.
Yeah. There's a lot of resources in this community that other communities don't have. And so I'm sure the Methodist Healthcare Ministry will take that into consideration. Sometimes, instead of directly providing the clinic, they'll actually provide grants. So for instance, they don't run a food bank, but they're the largest donor to the food bank of San Antonio. If you ever heard of the Texas Diaper Bank, it's free diapers for moms who can't afford it. That's the ministry. They don't brag, they don't advertise, they're a nonprofit. Just to answer that question, you can no longer donate to the Methodist, to the Hill Country Memorial Hospital. Our goal is to be sustainable without your donations. However, on behalf of the legacy foundations, please donate to them and to Good Samaritan. But that just goes to show, take the $3.5 million and put it to work in your community. We shouldn't have to need that to operate your hospital every year and continue to provide services. So that's the goal around that.
Well, related question of one that's buried in here somewhere is will medical costs go up then in order to be able to sustain that for-profit?
Yeah, and so this past year in 2022, and John talked about, both Johns talked about this, last year was the hardest year for healthcare finances in the history of healthcare across the nation. Last year, we increased our charitable distribution to the Methodist Healthcare Ministry. So many of you are probably saying, well, how do you do that? How do you do that in this tough environment? Well, it's how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time across a lot of aspects. So Jane it was really eloquent, and I loved hearing your data and your data from Torch and THA. If we could make small gains in each of those cost buckets, right? That's what we do. We help in each of the parts. It makes us more resilient. Jane talked about the storm. When there's a storm brewing and you're in the middle of the ocean, sometimes it helps to be on an aircraft carrier versus the most exceptional boat, small boat in the ocean. And that's the way to think about it. We've got more resiliency, more redundancy, and we're able to leverage when we can to continue to provide services. So how are we going to do that? The same way we just did in the hardest year in healthcare last year. Just a lot of good effort and a lot of good resources.
Thank you. I think we've touched on this one, but it is just one that came up so many times. Just want to maybe hit it from a little different angle. As a hospital built by this community, why wasn't the community engaged in the decision that such a small board of people made?
Well, I guess to take it in a different way, as trustees of the board, our bylaws specify that we are the people that are charged with looking out for the financial well-being and the strategic well-being of the hospital. So we did what the other boards have done over the last 52 years of our hospital since the founding and inception of the Board of Trustees. We looked out for the welfare and the future of the hospital. None of the other boards have consulted the community, and we didn't either. It's not in the bylaws. It's not part of how we operate. And again, it's tough. I get it. I'm sorry. Many times, there are people that I know in this community that I've worked with either on the board prior or on other boards, and so many times I wanted to call and say, hey, we're thinking about doing this. What do you think? But I couldn't. It was not appropriate. Again, we have competitors, we have employees, we have patients that all would lose confidence under these circumstances. If this information were public, they would lose confidence, and things would have gotten worse at the hospital.
If I can just add to what Jenny said, what I saw with the board is they went back 5 times to stay independent through this. No, let's look at this. No, let's look at this. Let's try this. The board wasn't hands down saying, okay, that's the path, let's go. It was, that's what the path we think it is. But, maybe there's some new data. Something has changed. We've heard something from THA. We've heard something from Torch. We have something new. Let's explore this option. Let's look at exploring that other option. The board went back 5 times to try to maintain that independence. And so that only augments what Jenny said about not being able to make that public. I will tell you also, I saw the board struggle with that 100% of the time. A communication committee of the board was set up because every one of you are people that the board serves and that I have the opportunity to serve. And having to keep this the way we had to in order to sustain ongoing operations was a struggle. And yet we knew for you and for our team, that was the right thing to do. It doesn't feel right. I get it. I get your anger. I get the frustration around that. But in order to sustain the operation, to be there for you every day, that was what the decision was.
HCM has already outsourced food services. What other services will be outsourced under Methodist/HCA?
I'll take on the first part about the outsourcing of food services. We made that decision some years ago, pre-COVID, and that was around being able to sustain a workforce. We actually found a organization that was aligned with our mission and our vision. They wanted to create healthy. They wanted healthy food offerings. They brought different options for both our patients and for our team members. And so we selected them. So that's the rationale why that was outsourced. I think your question is, are there going to be more outsourced entities under Methodist leadership?
And feel free to ask a question of THA and Torch too as well. I feel like y'all have great wisdom to provide. The answer to that is we have no plans on anything that we've seen so far. Traditionally, actually, Methodist Healthcare is we're moving away from outsourced. And what I could tell you is there's probably 3 services today that are currently outsourced, and that could be as simple as one person's role that's outsourced. That we're actually looking at hiring full-time. With respect to a few of those contractors that are more national contractors, We want to have those conversations with some of them, but we're going to hire more folks locally into some of the existing outsourced contracts that Hill Country has. And so that would be the answer there. Is I think we'll go the other direction from that right there. A good example is many hospitals in the country outsource dialysis. We have our own dialysis team at Methodist Healthcare, and that's how we were able to provide those services to Jourdanton. Just 2 weeks ago, they've never had dialysis before, and we just added dialysis down there. So we see that adding in the future.
Yeah, and frankly, that was a decision we made around quality. We had a national big-name dialysis company that was providing our inpatient dialysis in our hospitals, and we didn't like the way they were doing it. And we sat down and had conversations with them and told them the things they needed to change in order to retain our business. They didn't change. So we said goodbye. And we took it on internally. And we have all of our dialysis services on an inpatient basis throughout our system, including in Jourdanton, are through our own people.
And I would just add, you asked the example of how do we have cost-effective care. It is more cost-effective for us to do that in-house, and we think higher quality. That's an example of how do we bring value to the community is local jobs, higher quality.
Next question. What does Methodist relationship with their direct community look like, and what might that look like here in FBG?
Great question. We believe best strategy is local. And so my commitment is I'll be here every month meeting with the executive team. Not just myself. Dr. Hancock will be here meeting with the chief medical officer, our CFO. CFOs are a little not interpersonal, but they'll get out there. And I mean, Susan's wonderful. She's incredible. Susan's incredible. And so, but I'll be here every month. What's going well? What do you need? How can I support you? And those are full day visits, and we get to spend time and learning. And then really, it's up to the Hill Country executive team to help do a full strategy assessment of, and I would say the strategies from the team are really well defined. I think they're all the right strategies, and so I see our role really more as resourcing and supporting the strategic plan that's out there. And there's not a lot of difference in strategies that we see that are already in place or in flight relative to the team. Now, certainly as Gillespie County grows and Marble Falls and the adjacent communities, we're going to need additional strategies and additional support to serve the growing population. But as it exists today, I see our role at Methodist Healthcare as really an enabling force and a supportive force around the well thought out strategies that we see today.
Keep the mic.
Okay.
Will wages, salaries, and benefits be the same for local employees, or will that change?
I would tell you we've been very pleasantly surprised at how we've been able to offer competitive salaries and failure salaries across the board. And so far, I probably in person and on Zoom today. I was at Hill Country, but some people were Zooming in to Hill Country because it's their day off and whatnot. And so I probably met with 300 or 400 people today, and I didn't hear a single concern from a single employee today from Hill Country Memorial about wages or benefits. A lot of it was about, hey, tell me about the mission. Tell me about services. How can we build? How can we do more? People had great ideas. That was what I heard today. So the answer is yes, very supportive.
Thank you. Where does the money from the sale go, and how much is the profit, and who gets it?
So the sale from Hill Country Memorial goes into that legacy entity. So, and as Jenny alluded to, that middle entity, with the hope that the middle entity and the foundation can combine, and that the foundation could still support those broader determinants of health. And so that's where those funds go. And then, I'm sorry, Bobby, I missed the second part. How much? What I can tell you is if the foundation and the legacy entity combine, there will be anywhere from $150 to $200 million in this community to support the broader determinants of health, things like behavioral health, things like Jenny talked about childcare, investing in kids in high school, in middle school to go get healthcare education, nutrition, exercise, those things that really matter to keep people healthy.
Thank you. I think we've touched on this one, and so just remind me if we answered it thoroughly enough. Why not have the hospital run by a hospital district supported by taxes and still be locally owned and operated?
Well, I mean, again, in looking at taxing authorities or taxing entities, what we look at is that there's probably still a shortfall between what we could tax. Say if you had 20 cents on the dollar, what that would bring in would be just at the shortfall, but it doesn't allow for growth. It doesn't allow for expansion. I mean, it doesn't allow for the things that we have come to expect, this, continued upward path that we've had over the last 52 years.
The only thing I would add to that is taxing, as Jenny said, isn't the only answer. We are aware of another hospital that is looking at an engagement, and they are taxing because it is not servicing all of the required care. And they have another number of financial obligations that taxing just can't fill that hole.
Just because I'm tired of passing this microphone back and forth. Let me tell you, it's not unprecedented for rural communities to pass a taxing district. It has happened, but it's happened in parts of the state that have minerals and oil and gas revenue and less property, taxpayers, small businesses. I don't know your community perfectly, but in communities like Fredericksburg, no one likes paying more taxes. But where we see district elections pass are areas where, this is for lack of a better term, they kind of do it on the back of an industry rather than spreading it among the community. For that reason, and there might be people that disagree with me, I'm not sure how a tax election would do here. I don't expect, if you're like other parts of the state that I work with, I don't expect that would be a pleasant experience.
Next question. What is to say that Methodist won't remove the MRI and X-ray equipment along with other things that the community has purchased in order to generate more money? This equipment was purchased with local funds.
It will, if it's end of life, we'll remove it and replace it. But the last thing you want to do is take something that's functional and meeting the needs of the community and remove it. It's really expensive to take MRIs out. So I will tell you, in reviewing the Hill Country Memorial's strategic plan, they've identified more imaging that we need to bring, not less. And I think that's really well thought out of, and we're excited in the first month or two after April, and we really joined together as a family to make some announcements about capital investor, not anything that would be taking away services from the community there. But we need more stuff, not less stuff in the future.
Thank you. Next question. How is selling our hospital to Hospital Corporation America honoring the mission of Hill Country Memorial?
Our mission is remarkable always, and we know that means performing in the top decile of the country for any measure. We know that we were faced, when I looked at that data, and again, I didn't want to look at the data, I didn't want to see it, that we would need to reduce services. We didn't want to reduce services. Our local physicians require those services and need that. You need those services. And so not reducing services wouldn't have been aligned with our mission. That wouldn't have been remarkable. And we know our purpose is to provide generational health care, to provide healthcare that's the very best. And again, you demand the very best and you deserve the very best for generations to come. And so the board saw that data. Nobody wanted to see it. Like I said, they went back 5 times to the independence option because they wanted to ensure the right decision for all of you, and that was aligned with our mission and delivering the best care for you, for your grandchildren, for children yet to come.
Thank you. Next question. If the financial model of an independent rural hospital with 70% or more of the patients on Medicare basically is unsustainable for Hill Country Memorial, how is it a good investment for Methodist?
Well, since we just talked about MRIs, when I have to tell you, Methodist benefits every day from its partnership and co-ownership with HCA. And let me just give you an example on MRIs. Who do you think in the world, same exact MRI, who do you think gets the cheapest price on buying that MRI in the world? HCA. When we negotiate with drug companies for chemo patients, who do you think gets the best drug prices? When we think about healthcare, it's such a people business. About 50% of our costs every day is people. 20% is supplies. When we negotiate with insurance companies, we're negotiating as Methodist Healthcare, as St. David's Healthcare, right? And we negotiate on a statewide basis. And now we believe Fredericksburg. It's going to be easier for some payers to contract with us just in a global region for services. When you add up each of those pieces together in this tough world that we exist in right now in healthcare, and I encourage you, we were talking about Becker's today earlier. There's a lot of really well-educated folks in the room on the healthcare industry. You know, go read Becker's. That's the trade magazine that we all read every day. Go read that. You're going to see, you're going to learn about all the industry challenges. John referred to many of them today. And so I think to answer that question, it's the summation of all those small parts that make us able to stay ahead of the game and to invest and to be vibrant, for the future.
Yeah, and I might add, there are a lot of big operators in the hospital business, but not all of them do it well. It can be a race to the bottom again, so that's where you really look to organizations that partner with groups that have a strong mission, because that's ultimately where they're going to do the right thing, and they have to be physician-led, clinician-led. I'm sure your nursing leaders are just as powerful as well. So those organizations that have those clinical leaders are ultimately the ones that don't kind of lose their North Star.
And I'll add just one thing, and this is, I'm going to be clear, it's my opinion, it's not necessarily fact, but we've seen all shapes and sizes of these sort of deals, and there are some that are more extractive in nature, where they're trying to pull things from the community. HCA, as was mentioned, Methodist brings all that scale and purchasing power and muscle, but they also have a model where they want every hospital to stand on its own and support itself. And I just think that's a better general philosophy than some of the other mousetraps we've seen in other parts of the state.
I've just got a quick comment. Sure. And so Methodist Hospital was founded in 1963. It was founded for the community, by passing the hat. Hill Country Memorial, founded 52 years ago, for the community, by the community, with, I've heard the story about pennies in a jar. Okay? And here's the story of Methodist Hospital. For many years, it was able to make it work. It was founded as a 75-bed hospital, partially funded by the U.S. government. You may not know this, but it's a nuclear disaster-proof hospital on the bottom 2 floors. Why? Because in 1963, we were a little worried about that, and maybe that was a strategic plan for today, too, as well. So if you ever need to, find safety, we've got 3 days of food and water there. So come on down to San Antonio. So 1963, 75-bed hospital. And what happened? In about 1995, an incredible board came together and saw the future of HMOs and PPOs. And they saw the calculus and they said, you know what? We're struggling with making ends meet at Medicare. We're struggling with this. We can't make it. Let's negotiate from a position of strength. So Methodist Hospital said we got to be stronger together. And it formed the Methodist healthcare system. Who did it find? It sought out HCA as their partner. And it created the partnership, which we just celebrated 2 years ago, over 25 years of partnership. And the partnership and the founders just renewed for 25 more years.
Thank you, ma'am.
Methodist Hospital is stronger today than it was when Methodist Hospital made the decision to find a partner. And I know Methodist Hospital will be stronger tomorrow. When I look at Hill Country Memorial, its best days are not behind it. Its best days are ahead of it. And so I hope that story translates and resonates with you, because in many ways, the Methodist healthcare story is a Hill Country Memorial story. You were going to cut me off, and so that was my speech. Is that okay, Bob? Okay.
That's good.
Thank you.
That's good. Thank you. Next question. Under the Methodist ownership, will the moderator have access to the bomb shelter?
You have dodged enough bombs tonight. I feel like you're deserving, Pastor Rowe. You got whatever you need. Nice work. How about a round of applause for our moderator tonight? Oh, my goodness.
Next question. How will the hospital under new ownership attract health care workers that can balance the cost of coverage with the high cost of living in Fredericksburg? Another employee one. I think you've touched on that one, but yeah. Anything you want to add?
The only thing I would say is there's incredible academic resources. Texas Tech is vibrant in this community. There's amazing academic partners. One of the things we talked about with the Hill Country team today is can we provide access to more advanced clinicals for some of those rotations that may not be here, but have the programs be more centered closer to home? We would love to partner with Texas Tech. And they're right here, so thank you. Okay. I can tell you in San Antonio, we're partnering with Incarnate Word. We're partnering with St. Mary's for many, many programs. We're partnering with UT Health. And so we would like to partner on any workforce development initiative that's important to you, because the short answer is we're not training enough folks to take care of all the folks that need health care, whether it's physicians, whether it's nurses, whether it's laboratory, medical techs. We're not training, and there's good folks who want jobs, but there's not always the training programs to help them get the jobs they need to go to. So we would love to be your partner and help in any way we can.
Yeah, if you take a look at our workforce explainer, we turned away 15,000 qualified nursing students last year in the middle of a pandemic because we don't have capacity in our nursing schools. And so we're working closely with the Nurse Association and others across the state. Legislature's already put significant new resources in the base budget that they're going to be hearing tomorrow morning on the House side. In graduate medical education for physicians, nursing faculty, enhancement, loan repayment programs, I think, which will be helpful as well. And then we've been working with the Workforce Commission to look at apprenticeships coming straight out of high school, and the legislature is actually putting real money into the Workforce Commission for that. So I think, the legislature has kind of heard our message on this, but again, the key is the rubber needs to meet the road out in communities to actually make that happen. One size does not fit all.
Glad we pushed that question a bit. That was some gems in there. Thank you. Please explain the 1115 waiver.
Okay. The 1115 waiver is a Medicaid waiver that's negotiated between the state and federal government. And like I said, this is probably an oversimplification, but it's because Texas did not expand Medicaid. So historically, two pieces of that waiver, and this is going to get real geeky real fast. I apologize. One was called DSRIP, Delivery System Reform Incentive Program, but that's the innovation funds within the waiver. The other is called UC, or uncompensated care. So for what would have been an expansion population, you have the uncompensated care piece that not the state of Texas, but public entities like your authority could put up money and get matched, draw that down from the federal government and fund uncompensated care and innovation. That was one iteration of the waiver. In 2020, renegotiated, extended, rescinded, stood back up. The innovation part went away, and now it's in directed payment programs based on Medicaid utilization. You still have the uncompensated care piece of the waiver, but the rest are tied to Medicaid claims. I don't know this for sure, but I expect that your participation has diminished because of that change. Is that
Correct.
okay?
Yeah, it's about $6 billion a year in supplemental payments, again, to help with uncompensated care, but also to help build Medicaid rate up to commercial rates, because I mentioned earlier Medicaid only reimburses about 75% of cost. But again, remember, even with that significant program, there's still $4.6 billion in stranded uncompensated care cost across the state. And obviously, it's in the federal government's interest to try to manage that those supplemental payments down to get its fiscal house in order. And of course, they would love for the legislature to actually bring Medicaid rates up to cost, and for the state to expand coverage so they're not on the hook for costs that could otherwise be covered through existing sources.
Thank you. Thank you. Next question. What will happen to the Hill Country Memorial Medical Group? Will there possibly be some concerns or issues with contracts?
I think that's around the physician contracts and offering contracts for the employed physicians. I believe at this point all of the physicians have received contracts, and really I'm not involved in that contract negotiations, but we have indications that our physicians are beginning that, and that Methodist, and I'm going to turn this to Dr. Hancock and to Dan, like they've said, want to keep our physicians. And so want to keep our physicians whole and ensure that they are here to provide service to you and to the entire community.
You know, as Jane said, it's our goal to retain all the physicians who are currently employed, and the process of offering them letters of intent began back in December, and it's ongoing. Everybody's already received an LOI, but I think the only thing we're hearing from them is that the compensation model looks a little bit different. How much we put on productivity versus base salary, just some of that is a little bit different. But for the most part, I think we're getting the majority of physicians signed up, and those who have questions, we're continuing in dialogue with them to get into a position where they're comfortable.
Thank you. Thank you. In the contract, is there a possible option to buy back the hospital if that is an option in the future?
I'll start it and then give it to Jenny. The board, it was very important to have a buyback option for Hill Country Memorial, and that is included in the purchase agreement. And so there is a buyback. Like Dan said, in the middle of an ocean, you want to be on a big boat, and so we would obviously be stronger with Methodist than we would be alone. But there is the ability to buy back the hospital.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add, but obviously if it came to the point of, for instance, not being able to be profitable for some reason, we would be back in a very precarious situation, though we would have the opportunity to buy the hospital back and try something else.
Thank you. Oh.
one comment, and John just helped me out reminding this. I can't believe I didn't say this earlier, but somebody asked, how will Methodist healthcare be able to be sustainable around Medicare when so many are not? Just to give you an example of how we're able to drive success for our mission, all the money that the government supported all the hospitals that were struggling in the past 3 years. Methodist Healthcare and HCA was the only health system that I'm aware of in the entire country that gave all the money back. We told the federal government, thank you, we appreciated it, we thought we might have needed it, given how dire the circumstances were. But we've made it through, and we gave over $6 billion back to the government. Thank you for that talking point. I really appreciate it. I forgot to mention that.
Did you use a B or an M? Yeah.
B.
B. Wow. Wowzer.
That's for HCA.
Yep. Next question. Does the Attorney General need to sign off on the selling of a nonprofit to a hospital that is co-owned with a for-profit?
This goes to regulatory review, and yes, the AG is reviewing, but there's no indication of why this wouldn't be approved.
Okay, you have had a bunch of easy ones, so yeah, the harder one.
We just knew all the
Exactly. Why was the decision made to remove the board members' names off the website?
I'll start it, Jenny. I'm going to take this one and then turn it to Jenny. We made that decision around unity of messaging. I will tell you, I own this one. We needed to put the board members' names back up sooner than we did. You reached out to us and we did. But the intention wasn't to hide the board members. It was to ensure that we had unity of messaging. And we needed to put the names back up sooner, and it's subsequently been done, but we wanted to make sure that we had that same message out.
Yeah, I would say that it was a mistake on our part. It was with good intention, rather than having the community ask 9 different people for an answer and having it come out somewhat different with each person's interpretation. We chose to do that. But I mean, even not really in that far of a past retrospective on it, I think it was wrong, and I'm sorry for that. I am sorry that we did that.
Thank you. Hill Country Memorial has many other properties. Why wasn't it a consideration to sell off some property and keep Hill Country Memorial independent?
Certainly that could have been done. I mean, again, it's sort of like what we talked about when we look at the iceberg. There's a lot of ways to stay afloat. I mean, eventually the money from the proceeds of the sale of any property that we have is going to run out, but it could have kept us going for a little while. So I, again, negotiate from a position of strength, and that's what we did.
Next question. What part of Hill Country Memorial will become Methodist and what parts will not? Please be very specific, i.e. wellness center, thrift store, foundation, etc. I think so too.
Sorry. Oh.
I think so, but yeah. All right. Well, we could sing a song. Let me see here. What would you say is the primary positive reason the board chose Methodist? The primary positive reason chose Methodist to be the partner?
Yeah, for us as a board, it was quality. Again, quality, quality, quality. We wanted somebody who looked sort of like us in quality. Again, sort of, but it was quality. It was around quality, and it was, around their mission statement. I mean, that's a great mission statement. So that's the reason.
And the board compared a number of different organizations, and Jenny's right. Head and shoulders, Methodist stood above the other organizations, and we knew what you deserved to have, and the board chose Methodist because of its quality. And as one board member said, it's based on what they've done in other places. And what we saw is they did really good work in other places, and that is an indication of how that they will treat us in the future.
Yeah, so I told this story today at the town halls at the hospital, and I think it's telling about Hill Country Memorial. This process started, sometime in the last couple of years, and at the beginning of an acquisition process, questionnaires go out to potential, buyers. And it's, secret on both ends. And our senior VP, who's, handling the potential communication there, handed me a list of questions. He goes, hey, there's a potential acquisition that, we're looking at, and I can't tell you who it is. It's a secret. But here's a list of questions that you need to answer, that I need this information back, from you. And I got the list of questions, and I looked at the questions, and I said, it's Hill Country Memorial. True story. He's in the back of the room. He'll verify. And why did I know that? Because the questions were all about quality. And so it was obvious who was a potential suitor. Well, we were the suitor, right? Yeah. We're going dating.
Thank you. If you had this decision to make over again, what, if anything, would you have done differently?
I wish I could change the data. What do I wish we would have done differently? I wish we would have done this town hall earlier. I wish we would have answered your questions earlier, because Jenny and I have done this. This will be our 22nd presentation around this. And what we've found, and I hope tonight we've been able to answer for some of you, I wish I would. I understand why. I don't like it. I really don't like this answer. But now I understand why. And that everyone's saying, thank goodness it was Methodist. To a presentation, I've had people come up to me to say, thank goodness it's Methodist. So what do I wish I would have done different? I wish we would have done this town hall earlier. And so thank you all for being raw, for sharing really, really hard questions. I know Bobby thinks those are softballs, but really sharing hard questions, and that giving us the opportunity, hopefully, to answer those in a way that we know the answers to, and that there's nothing hidden.
I mean, I don't have a lot to add to that. I think that we went through a thorough process, and we revisited time and again what were we doing and how were we doing it. And I mean, it's a process, and it's a hard process, and we went through it. I can't really honestly think of anything that we would have done differently. The names, taking them down immediately after, that's about it.
Can you name any other entities who expressed interest in purchasing the hospital? The short list.
We're not allowed to do that. There was non-disclosure agreements to protect their data, and I'm sorry, I'm not at liberty to be able to share that.
Thank you. Are there any plans to limit or stop OB deliveries after the first few years of the takeover? That's one I should have reframed.
You want to rephrase that question, please? It sounds so hostile.
That's on me. That was my fault.
Okay. All right. No, we want people in Gillespie County to be fertile and have lots of babies and have them at a Hill Country Memorial You've got an incredible OB service with incredible quality standards around it. So we'd like to grow the OB service, but that's not up to me, and nor is it up to the people in my generation. So
I think just as an example of, keeping patients in Hill Country Memorial, you had a great conversation. Was it was it Amanda, the L&D nurse I spent time with this morning? Renee, and then also I think Amber. And I can tell you I had great conversations with several of the L&D team members today who were like, Dan, we think some of the 35-week babies that are your more common feeder growers, are having to leave. And what could we do to partner around, adding some more support to keep some of the babies that are leaving right now in a more advanced nursery here? And so I think, again, flip the question. I think it's a matter of how do we continue to support the acceleration of service delivery here to keep more moms and babies connected in the community that they love. There's a lot of reasons why it's great to have a baby in the community you live in, right? Grandparents and family, and that's such an incredible once-in-a-lifetime experience. It's great to share that with folks, and it's hard to share that when they're an hour away or an hour and a half away as well.
In your experience of working with other rural hospitals, what can this community do to enhance the relationship?
Don't leave. Chamber of Commerce says shop local, for things that healthcare services that they can provide here, we want you to stay here, and that's the biggest single thing you can do. Speaking of labor and delivery, if you can hold on to that service, provide it locally, that's a really good thing in terms of quality and outcomes too. In the last generation, Dan mentioned flipping in a different sense. Of the 158 rural hospitals in Texas, only 64 of them still provide obstetrical services. That's about 40%. A generation ago, it was 60% that did, 40% that didn't. Today, it's 40% that do, 60% that don't. And when you map that by county in Texas, we're seeing, we call them OB deserts. And the further you get from care, especially when you're in labor, is a problem. So hold on to OB and stay here when you have the chance to stay here.
Next question. How will Methodist attempt to increase the census that seems to have been on a decline in the past year or so?
Yeah, we've already addressed several of those things. How do we expand services? We only have a glimpse of that now. Pulmonary critical care, inpatient dialysis are just early ideas. We haven't even sat down and really gotten to know the medical staff and brainstormed with them yet. We feel like they're going to have a lot of ideas. We also talked about the patient placement center with Methodist Healthcare and the fact that a lot of the patients in our freestanding ED, especially at Bernie, are going to very likely, love the idea of coming to Hill Country rather than going into San Antonio. Just a few ideas. Yeah,
and we didn't even touch on cardiology. You have 3 of the best cardiologists in the state of Texas that live right here. They're incredible. World class. I don't know if you. I'm telling you, world class cardiologists that live right here, and then you've got some new cardiologists who are starting to come to the hospital from Austin Heart, and this just goes to show you we're not interested in messing with what's working, and so Austin is different than Methodist, but you're getting incredible support from Austin Heart, and we would love to see that continue to grow, and for Austin Heart to be down here more. And to the extent that it makes sense for those patients to get services in Austin, fantastic if it's not provided here. Now, Austin doesn't have a heart transplant program. Methodist Hospital does. And so how do we support continuity of care around the services that don't exist here? But what I also tell you is I think Austin Heart's going to grow here. And I'm excited about what the Hill Country team has already done to increase PCIs and some of the work that's doing here. It's incredible. Cardiology is an area that I see a lot of significant growth and more services, more high-risk procedures being done here, at the hospital.
Thank you. Got time for just 1 or 2 questions. I think we're at about 30 seconds. What steps are in place to assure the growth? No. Are there any steps in place to assure Gillespie County and all of our other clients of their concerns regarding health care that they will be addressed in the future?
That feels like a question for you. I don't know why, but do you have any thoughts there? More from I'm not sure the specific of the question.
Can you say it again, Bob?
Oh, shoot. What steps are in place to assure Gillespie County and all other clients that their concerns regarding health care will be addressed in the future?
I'm wondering if it's the board. I think the question might be related to how does the voice of the Hill Country get to San Antonio? I think that's what the question is. And yeah. And the 8-person board, one of those people, and we didn't address that, so thank you who asked that question. One of the people on the 8-person Methodist board, plus that chief of staff, so that 9-person board, will sit on the council in San Antonio. And so they will they'll do strategic work, I would imagine, at the local level and be bringing that voice to San Antonio and representing the Hill Country. And so, as Jenny said, one of the things on our objectives was to ensure that there was a voice of the Hill Country at the Methodist level.
Sure, and to the extent it was an advocacy question for the county, what I would mention is I was in Austin last week. I met with your senator, your state senator, Senator Flores, and I had an hour-long discussion with him about, Pal was there with me, thanks Pal, one of our amazing leaders, and we talked about Texas Tech and partnerships and workforce development. And I can tell you, the state is very interested in whatever they can do to help support our great academic institutions locally and workforce development. We talked a lot about behavioral health and the shortage in providers across and resources, and so and he was very excited for Methodist Healthcare being the partner of choice here, given what he also has seen in Jourdanton. And what we've done to increase services in that community that he also serves. And so from that standpoint, we'll continue to advocate. We've got a seat at the table, and we've got great support with the Texas Hospital Association and with Torch. And so I see that advocacy only growing through this partnership.
This might be the last question. How is it possible that we can help? This is kind of related to that one that we asked a while ago about relationship. What is the one most strategic thing that employees in community can do to provide the best atmosphere for us moving forward for the best health care in our community?
I guess it's shop local. And so what can you do to support this organization? Continue to utilize the services. Continue to give us feedback on what we're doing well and what we could do different. Because there's a whole bunch we could do different. And so I think it's important for Methodist, for the local leadership, to know what matters to you, the community, and why you come to Hill Country Memorial. And so I would say that is critical. You are the receiver of that care. We want you to receive that care and help direct that care as far as what those needed services are.
You're doing it tonight. Thank you for showing up. And thank you for being here. Thank you for being engaged. Thank you for your questions, your thoughts, for the high standards that you want to see for healthcare in your community. What I would ask is, what's the singular thing? Don't stop. Don't stop being advocates. Don't stop being having a high standard for what you deserve and the care that you deserve. And so I would just say, I can't tell you how encouraging it is to see how deeply you all care about what you've built. And I can't tell you how much of a commitment that makes Methodist Healthcare want to honor your commitment through honoring our mission for you. And so I hope you can see that tonight through the discussion. But thank you for being here.
Please join me in thanking our panel for this evening. As stated earlier, there's a pile of questions that many that were duplicated, some that were actually sermons. I imagine that the bulk of those will be posted on the Hill Country Memorial website under frequently asked questions and given answers. I want to thank all of you for showing up, for us being community. I do want to have a prayer as we depart, if you don't mind. Yeah. Gracious God, our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this gathering. We thank you, Lord, for pain shared, for anger, for the grief, for courage, Lord, for the joy of hope. And we thank you, Lord, for our hospital system, the one in the past, the one in the present, and the one in the future. So, Lord, we ask your presence in this community because we are reminded that if we're together, we're one, but if we're divided, we're actually through. So, God, we pray that you'd bring about healing for our hearts, our restorations in any broken relationships, and wellness. Wellness as we seek to have your grace and your mercy surround us so that, again, we might not just have quality health care, but quality community continued. So this and so much more we pray as we venture home this evening. And all God's people said, Amen. Thank you for coming.